Welcome to the 30-Year-Old Virgin podcast, where we discuss all things sex, love, and relationships. I'm your host and your favorite late bloomer, Allison Cadena, and on this week's episode, we brought back New York-based social worker and psychotherapist, Monica Gavilanes, LMSW.
Yep, I love how you say my name. Very nice.
Thank you. I try to give it just enough Spanish accent.
You know what I'm saying? A little flair, a little sazon.
If you notice when I say my own name, I'm like, Allison Cadena.
That's just like garlic powder, no sazon.
It's just, I blame my parents, because Monica, you can say it with an accent. You can't, Allison with an accent.
Alison.
Sounds terrible. It's just not. But yes, so if you checked out our first episode, we had Monica on that one. Make sure to check that out later if you haven't. But in our first episode, we were talking about late bloomers, and I was not going to waste, the opportunity for you guys that aren't late bloomers to have Monica tell you about yourselves too. So we have her back on. We took a bunch of questions from the community about a gamut of sex, love, relationship, dating. And now we're going to have Monica answer them live for you. So welcome back, Monica.
Happy to be back.
Woo. I'm so excited. I feel like we had such a great conversation.
We did.
So I'm like, I know there's going to be so much gems, so much tea, so much juice. It's going to be great. But for the people who didn't check out your first episode, can you run us through again a little bit of your background, what you do, what you focus on?
Absolutely. So like you said, I'm based in New York, social worker by trade, but right now I'm a practicing therapist, trauma therapist specifically. So I work with BIPOC identified folks, first generation immigrants that have experienced complex trauma. And I try to do it through a decolonial lens. So we're not really diagnosing folks with like depression and anxiety. Like we're taking a much more integrative approach using like mind, body, and spirit to help them unlearn and release some of that trauma that gets stored in our bodies before it gets stored in our mind. I tend to work mainly with like young adults. I didn't set out to do that, but it kind of just happened. I feel like that's the generation that is the most stressed out right now because the world is falling apart. But yeah, that's where we are.
It's been our lifetime. It's just falling apart. Look at me. Am I a young adult? I don't think I'm like a regular.
You're like
mid-sized adult.
I think I'm a regular adult.
Right?
Like, I'm not like supersized adult.
Yeah.
I'm like large.
Yeah,
know?
Exactly. I'm like getting there.
You know
like
what
I still have to ask my mom a lot of questions. Like when you get a new
100%.
job and I'm like, Mommy, I need a 401k. Which one is the one that I pick?
How do I pick insurance?
Yes. So she's still very present. So I'm not all the way there. I don't like making my own doctor's appointments.
The journey, girl, is the journey.
I'm getting there. I'm getting little by little. But yeah, as I mentioned, so we took a bunch of questions before the show, and I have questions of my own that I'm gonna throw in there because I'm not gonna miss out. Fuck that.
I'm not billing you, so let's go.
Hell yeah. But actually, I want to start off before I forget my question. In our last episode, we ended on talking about heartbreak and overcoming heartbreak. And so a question that came up for me that we didn't get to go over is, after a relationship, a lot of people, they like the idea of getting closure. I will tell you now, all my life, I said closure's a crock of shit. You should find that yourself. Why are you going and asking people? But I became a victim of closure. Where I was going through a situation and I felt like oh my God, I'm stuck. I'm still thinking about this. I'm not getting over it. To me, it felt like it had been too long. And someone suggested, why don't you have a closure conversation? This person's reaching out to you. Why don't you ask the questions that you want to ask and see if that helps you get over it? And so I wanted to get your idea on, is that a thing? Is closure a thing? And is it something that you get from the other person? Or is there some other way that we should be seeking it?
Okay, that's victim of closure. That's so funny.
I don't know why I did that. I'm telling y'all right now, I'm like, that was a mistake. For me.
Right? That was your experience. I do think closure is a thing. I like to use the word just like resolution because I feel like that's what it really is about. Mm-hmm. And to the idea of, is it something that you can get on your own? Is it something that needs to come from the other person you were in relationship with or a family member, whatever the case might be, I think that exists more in a gray area. And the reason why I say that is because I do believe a lot of healing can happen in relationships. I do think that if a relationship is healthy and two people are self-aware enough to really understand like what are the bags that they're bringing into this connection, how do they show up, there could be a lot of healing, because one of the reasons why relationships is where most of our triggers show up is because it's like as strong as of an attachment as the ones we've had with our caregivers, with our parents, right? So I do think that it is possible to get closure from another person, but the caveat is you need to have a certain understanding of yourself. So what I mean by that is if you find yourself at the end of a relationship, it's the connection has been ruptured and you're seeking out closure, what is it that you're trying to get? What answer are you trying to get? Some feedback. What question are you trying to get an answer from? Right? So, do I need closure because I want to understand how could this person have treated me like this? What could they tell you that will make you feel better? And like literally ask yourself that question, right? So, if I was to hear this, I would be able to release this. If I was to never get this response from him, like I don't think I can move forward, or from her or from them, like I could never move forward, right? So I think that's important, because is it that you're trying to actually resolve an old wound through this person again?
Mm-hmm.
And whatever this person says, because they were not the original harmer, is actually not going to give us what we're looking for. That is the situation where you need to find resolution within yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a certain level of awareness and exploration that needs to happen. Now, is it a situation where maybe it's touching on an old wound, but there's been a lot of healing done there and you aren't necessarily looking for resolution, but it's important for you to kind of tie the ending of this in a nice, amicable way for whatever reason, right? Maybe there's something there, but again, it would kind of bring you to, well, why is that important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most times resolution, closure, however, whatever language you want to use, is going to come from yourself. Because at the end of the day, what happens is we personalize things a lot. This person treated me really badly. It must mean this about me. And the funny thing is, you might not be like actively hearing those thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's some part within you that really is holding that truth and is motivating you to seek out answers. That's what a lot of people do when it comes to like trauma bonds, or like, folks are like, I was for myself in the same type of situation. It's an unconscious repetition that we're playing out and we don't even realize it. But if you pause and you ask yourself some questions, you can bring to the surface a bit more some of that unconsciousness that's actually motivating your actions. So don't just jump to seeking something outside of yourself. Most of the time you could find it within,
Right. And I think this ties a lot to what you said in the other episode about like how heartbreak is grief and that like it needs its time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will say that in my situation, I was like, I wanted closure because I thought there was some like time limit of like you've been stuck on this too long. Of like literally, because I will say like there was nothing. I asked myself, I'm like, what do you expect to hear? And I was like, I don't know what I want to hear. I don't know what I'd expect to hear. I had just gotten to a place where I'm like, I'm still stuck on it. And I'm like whirling around the same info that I'm like, maybe there's something missing here that you can give me to like settle it. And then at the end of the conversation, it was like an hour and a half. And I'm like, this did not settle anything. Like it confirmed some things that I thought. It gave me a little bit more info. It didn't get me to any resolution.
Yeah.
And now this person thinks it was like an open door to like enter back into my life. And I'm like, oh, I didn't want that neither.
Mm-hmm. That's why it's so important to like really lean into pauses, and when you lean into a pause and you kind of pay attention, this is another good indicator, right? Like, is there a sense of urgency when you think about seeking out closure? Because when your body is stepping into a sense of urgency, and like you can kind of notice what that feels like, right? And sometimes it's a familiar urgency because it might show up in other spaces in your life and other connections. But if you can sense there's a sense of urgency behind it, 9 out of 10 times, it has nothing to do with the other person. But your body's in the stress response and is trying to protect you. And there's a part that feels like, if I can just figure this out, we'll be good. But then what happens most of the time is, like you said, right, you're actually left unsettled.
Right.
Yeah.
On that note, I've heard, again, maybe because I spend too much time on TikTok. I after a breakup, I've heard like don't date anyone for a year, or make sure the other person's been like single for a year. Is there any truth to that, or is it also just kind of subjective to the person of like how long should you wait before jumping into something else, or how can you tell that you're ready to go into something else?
I think that the truth is there are so many people that are dating blindly in the world right now. And that is why it's beneficial to take your time and find space in between people. And what I mean when I say there's a lot of us dating blindly goes back to, I think I mentioned it in the first episode, this idea of being aware of yourself and how you're showing up, why you're showing up that way, and what is going to be potentially played out eventually sooner or later, right, within this connection. Because if you are having a relationship, it ends, and then you move right into the next one and you haven't even taken a moment to like kind of take inventory. Why did I get into that last relationship? What did this relationship reinforce within me? What was I able to release? What is the narrative I'm telling myself about myself after this relationship? So you're not taking a break to do that type of work. Now, the length, right, that is necessary to do that type of introspection and kind of come back to that relationship with yourself, no one can name that for you. You know what I mean? So when people are like, you have to be single for at least a year in between relationships, like no one can name that length, but are you doing that?
Right.
Or are you just jumping into kind of like that unconscious repetition, like, oh crap, now my fear of being alone, or my fear of not having a family, or my fear of feeling undesirable is kicking in. I have to seek out the next Band-Aid.
Yeah.
And then we find ourselves in these loops and in these patterns. So I think it's less about time and it's more about, okay, how do I debrief with myself, honestly? And sometimes that's calling yourself out on your shit, like I did it again. I was with someone who was emotionally unavailable, or I did it again. I was with someone who is like, really clingy and like caused me to retreat. What am I repeating here? So you have to do that type of awareness first.
I'm always about debunking all these advice things because I'll be doing my own shit.
But you know what? I appreciate that, because I think that a lot of us have to get to a place where we learn to trust our own judgment and really have confidence in our decisions, right? So it's kind of like you could take what I'm going to say, you can take what your friends are going to say, but ultimately, where does your trust lie? Now that can be like, I feel like I'm going to do this. Like, fuck it. I'm going to hit him up. I'm going to look for closure. I trust that judgment. What does trust of self feel like to you? Does it feel like that now? Or are you feeling that urgency we talked about earlier? So what's really going on, But it's not bad to trust your own judgment. I think self-trust is really important, especially with dating. There's a lot of people out here that will gaslight you.
And I think also, like for me, I think why I'm working on trusting myself is because everybody can give you advice. Everybody can have been in a long-term relationship or have been in a relationship with the person. So they could have even dated the person you dated. That don't mean that it's the same situation. And that's one thing I think you mentioned it in the last episode about like people coming into it with their own experience and how it's like a little bit like, not to say tainted, but like it influences
a little foggy
advice.
lens. Yeah. It informs the way that they're going to see your situation 100%.
Exactly. And I'm like, literally, even if you dated the same person that they're dating, you're not the same person that they are, and it's not the same time as them, hopefully.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna just take all this info and I'm gonna do my own thing with it, because I don't know. They don't know what situation I'm in. I don't know the full details of their situations.
Yeah.
So, but moving on to the next question. Someone asked, and this is very poignant for our New York City people. Living with an ex, is it doable? Because rent is fucking killer in New York City right now. That is word for word the question as submitted.
So I'm assuming this person's saying like, is it a good idea to live with an ex? Oh, that could get messy real quick, right?
It sounds a mess to me. I would never do
even
it.
the way, I don't know who asked this, but even the way you phrased it, I feel like you know the answer. Trust yourself. I think there's so many factors to consider. Like, was there an actual real friendship within the relationship that you guys can return to? And I say that because some people are out here with partners and they're not really like in friendships with their partners. You know what I mean? So I think that's something to consider. Are you guys able to like have boundaries and respect each other's boundaries? Are both people involved actually over it and like not wanting to like reconcile or whatever the case might be? So it's kind of like, can we really exercise a platonic connection and friendship? Because I would kind of want to ask, like, you know, I get it. Rent is expensive as hell, but like, are you kind of staying there for another reason, low key? Like, because are you trying to get out? You know, there's a lot of things to consider, but I think the friendship key is really important.
Yeah.
It is possible, but it's tricky.
I think that's even something that people should consider when like, can you be friends after a relationship? Because I always say, I'm like, well, you weren't friends before, you know, I granted I haven't been in like a long-term relationship to know that like, okay, you know, maybe you do have a friendly relationship or fell out of love or you know what I mean? But to me, I'm like, but if you weren't friends before, what you need to be friends after? Personally, that's what I always say. But
that's fair. And I feel like, you know, if within the relationship, because you might not have been friends prior to the relationship, right? But during it, you have to find ways to cultivate that type of connection and intimacy. I'm kind of also from the school of thought of like, once you're an ex, I leave you in the past kind of thing. But it's not like there's animosity. So it's not like we're going from partners to enemies, you know, but it's just like, that was the season. We both served the purpose for each other, and now we get to move on and write the next chapter of our lives, you know? But I kind of want to say don't use rent as an excuse, but
you can say that.
I'm gonna say don't use rent as go get another roommate. What's wrong with you? Stop it. You being messy. You being real messy.
I wanted to say that, but I was like, we have a professional. So
professionally,
she can say
you're being messy.
In my professional opinion. Okay, so we got a couple questions that have to do with confidence, insecurity. So the first one being, how do you deal with feeling like you're constantly not good enough?
That is a really loaded question with a loaded response, right? The reason why I say loaded is because I think that really internalized belief of not good enough is fed in so many different ways. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, did it start within the family? How was it reinforced within the community, like ring that goes outside of that, right? So like your neighborhood, your society. Then on the larger ring is kind of like how we're fed all these images of beauty standards, of personhood standards, and how that continues to inform. And that's something you can't even escape, even if you like remove yourself from certain circles, right? So it's very deep, this idea of not good enough. And I think a good place to start is where did you learn that you're not good enough? You know what I mean? And this is a really good way to kind of connect to what people have come to know as like inner child work and things like that. Because a lot of the times when we have such a strong belief or internal experience of not good enough, it started when we were young, you know? And I always invite people to think, if you can imagine like little you, right? Would you have the lack of care to tell this child they're not good enough? Because that's what you're doing to yourself when you continue to tell yourself that message, right? Or sit with that belief or ruminate on it. For it to be that strong, it has to have been with you for a while, you know? So I think always remembering that you're continuing to show that lack of care to a part of you that is still with you and is very young. And what does that part need to feel good, right? So when you find yourself kind of like criticizing or that negative self-talk, a good strategy that I suggest to my clients is if you have like a photo of yourself when you were younger that like really speaks to like something beautiful that you see within yourself, right? Keep that photo close because it's a nice tool to externalize what's happening within. And like when you're doing this negative self-talk, look at that photo and like remember like this is who you're talking to. You know? What do you want to say instead? Do you want to say, I'm sorry for actually shitting on you for all this time? Do you want to remind this person, because that's what it is, right? Of their strengths, of their beauty, of their grit, of all these amazing qualities. How can you begin to shift the relationship a little bit?
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say that I'm one of these people. It's not my question. We have real questions from other people. But I know that's something that I struggle with a lot and I've been working on. And for me, at least, just acknowledging that that's a thing you have. And like, I know I can go back and pinpoint times in my childhood where it like either started or was, magnified.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ooh.
even just knowing those situations and knowing that that's like a bad habit of thinking that, and even seeing it, like I'm the go hard at work because
Yeah.
I think I have to be the best at everything or else it's not enough, So I think just being aware of that, I call myself out, and that helps to a certain extent of like we talk about late bloomers on this podcast a lot, thinking I'm not good enough for a relationship. I can call myself out and be like, girl, you think you're not good enough at goddamn anything. And like, I'm not saying that that's good or bad, but like, let's be honest that that's always, your head is always going to go there first. So let's not give it so much stock, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Yeah, like you always say that, like, we know that you're going to think that. You're looking for evidence of this again, like put it away kind of thing. So
I love how, like, that's such a great example of that internal relationship that we need to build and be continuously intentional about. Because sometimes people will like do that, but they're not consistent with it. And it's kind of like, this is like another buzzword in therapy right now, reparenting. But the truth is, that is what reparenting is. Like if you were to parent yourself as a child, how would you do it? How would you treat yourself? And that's how we have to always treat ourselves. So sometimes people will be like, well, my parents treated me like shit. Like, I don't know how to be a parent. That's a good place to start. What do you not want to do? What did they do that really fucked with you? How are you continuing to do that? And that example with work, it kind of goes back to what I said. Like, that tends to be a space where the personal emotional injuries show up, but then also the societal emotional injuries. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be productive. If you're not productive, you're not worth this, or you are not deserving of something. So it's like, you kind of got to like take the steps just to see, okay, where did someone take a camera to this floor right now,
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know, I just think even being able to call it out in the moment is like a step forward. I feel like sometimes 100%. A crazy person, I feel like I think one thing and then another voice comes out like, I know you didn't just say that to us.
Well, girl, remember what I said in the first episode? We are all multiple beings. I think we have this, the way that this society is very individualistic, it has taught us that we are individuals. Our mind is a mono mind, but it is a plural mind. There's so many different parts. That's why you feel like, I've been working on through this framework for a while. So like, to me, like, it's kind of like become a second language. But what you just said is what it is. Like, you have a part that is like shitting on you. And then you have a part that's trying to referee and coach this part to calm down. And then you have a part that's like, girl, you a bad bitch. Like, come on, pull up, let's go. So that internal experience is very real. And we all actually have it. We just might not be able to track it as well as she tracks it. She tracks it really well.
Yeah, it took a while. I think there was points where one voice was way louder than the other one. The critical, you're not good enough, was like loud as hell, and everyone else was like, "Excuse me,
yeah,
excuse me, can we just get a word in?"
Yeah,
no? Okay.
Absolutely.
On the same line, someone asked, "How do you know your worth?" Which is kind of vague, so I'm gonna let you do with that what you please.
How do you know your worth? Well, how are we defining worth? I guess, what makes someone worthy to you, right? And I think that's a good place to start. Like, to me, right? Like, if I was to ask myself that question after a while and where I am now, I would say maybe like 10 years ago, it would be a different answer. But like, to me, you're worthy because you are. That's it, right? So like, I think you need to ask yourself the question of, how are you defining worth? And then the second question I would like kind of invite you to sit with after that is, what has informed the way that you define worth, right? If you were to say someone worthy is someone who has a good job and like has a home and is able to have money in their savings account, okay, well, Where did you learn that that makes someone worthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the people in your life. Who do you identify as worthy? Does everyone in your life that you deem worthy align with that criteria? No? So are they not worthy? Like challenging your thoughts. But I think figuring out what your definition is and what has informed that definition is a good first step.
Yeah, for sure. I'm
But
like,
we're all inherently worthy, y'all. Straight up.
that's
Yeah.
true. But I will say that, like, I give my examples in case they help anybody, because it took me a while to get any kind of semblance of something. But while I lived with my parents, I think they were informing a lot of my worthiness, and that's why I never felt good enough, because
Mhm.
in myself, I wanted to be happy, and on their side, they wanted me to be successful. And so I was like trying to get the better job, trying to get, save some money, stack it up, you know what I mean? And it was like, I was like chasing this thing, and I'm like, oh my God, but I'm not genuinely happy. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
because happiness to me is like pursuing art stuff, or like I learned to ride a bike last summer.
Yeah.
And that was like the highlight of my year. I learned to ride a bike after 30 years. You know what I mean? That's not really on their plan for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I moved out that I was like, oh, actually, this to me makes me, quote, worthy. This is like, makes my life worth living.
Mm. I think you bring up a good point, because what I would say to that is um, recognizing that your parents had deemed success as a marker of worthiness. What I'm hearing you describe is actually they are coming from a space of survival,
Mm-hmm.
and they're parenting from fear. And what do they think it means if you're not successful?
Mm-hmm.
Does that then equate struggle? Are they attaching your struggle to their struggle?
Oh,
Because when
sure.
they struggled, it meant, we didn't have food on the table, or whatever the case might be,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it doesn't even sound, and this is something that a lot of like parents, right, especially folks that like come from like, immigrant families, or like historically marginalized communities, right? We're like always in the struggle. So there's so much fear-based parenting happening. And as kids, because we don't even have like a wide lens yet, we don't understand. It's not that they think this is worthiness. They want us to be safe, and they're low-key freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
This has so much to do with them, because they're coming from a generation and an experience that you sing, you are poor. What do you mean? You can't be poor, because what I know what poor is. That was dangerous as hell. I don't want that for you, because I love you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way they kind of like practice that can sometimes be a bit damaging because of that lack of awareness,
Right, for sure. Okay, so the next set of questions I'm characterizing as, what am I doing wrong? So the first one literally says, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Single men don't talk to me for too long, or I think they're single, but turns out they were lying. I don't want to be a side chick. I'm tired. What can I do differently?
Ooh, girl.
A lot in there.
There's a lot in there. I kind of, from that question, I'm almost getting the feeling like she has been a side chick, maybe. That's what she's saying. I don't want to be a side chick. And I'm also kind of hearing her maybe identifying a pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
So going back to what I think I said this the first episode, this idea of like unconscious repetitions. Like we're seeking out answers to something that happened to us a long time ago often, or we're trying to continuously protect ourselves from some internal experience we had.
Mm-hmm.
So first I would kind of ask this person, okay, well, what are you doing to kind of get to know somebody early on in the game? Are you rushing that you're missing markers, maybe that this person actually is not single, like they said? When you say like single guys don't talk to me for too long, okay, well, are you seeking out the same type of single guy, right? So kind of like if you were to like think of a prototype, are you going for a similar emotional profile? Are you going for a similar career profile, someone who doesn't have a lot of time because they work a really high demanding job, or whatever the case might be? Like I would invite this person to look at the patterns within the partners or the people that they've talked to see if there's something similar, and then see if they can understand, what is my role in seeking this out?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. And I can't help but notice the lumping of single guys, just period.
Mm.
Because to me, I will say, now that I've started dating, I'd be dating everybody and their mother. But I'm not always like, if they don't call me again, I'm okay with that, because I feel like I'm open to dating a lot of people. That doesn't mean that then I want to continue dating that person. And it's kind of like, all right, we're going to try it out. And then if they fall off the earth, they fall off the earth. Because I only really was invested like 1 out of these 10, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost wonder, like, are they too invested in just anybody hitting them back?
I think that sounds like you're barking up the right tree. It also kind of reads like a bit of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to that idea, right? When you notice urgency within yourself, you're trying to solve a problem, you're trying to control. So that tells me like this person may already be stepping into dating situations with this lens versus what you just described, which is dating is an experience, is an experience, is an experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not attaching it to an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not attaching it to expectations that are informed by my fears that I'm aware of or not aware of, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like this person may need to learn what are some things that they want to experience just in connection. How can they prioritize that over maybe some of the expectations that they're stepping into it with?
Mm-hmm.
People can smell it on you, man.
Mm-hmm.
Can. And the truth is our bodies like really can like sense it. And that will trigger stuff to be like, no, I gotta go. I'm done.
Yeah.
You're wildin'.
I don't know if you can answer this question because I don't know if it's true or not. I heard that you can literally tell your chemistry with a person by like their smell, like that the body knows
the pheromones or something like that.
Well, yeah, I heard that. Like, again, I mean, don't trust anything I've ever heard because it's probably from some bozo on TikTok, but that supposedly if you have like a good chemistry with someone, they will smell better, like their natural, like their pheromones will smell better to you versus if you don't, they don't smell as good. I don't know if you would know about that.
I don't know about that, but it sounds true. But you said TikTok, so I'm gonna say fact check it.
Right.
But not with me.
Maybe she knows. I don't know.
But not with me. I feel like that could make sense. Just because I think that when you like so let's just go to like a total neuroscientific kind of lens, right? When you like someone, and there's like you guys are vibing or whatever the case might be, your cortisol, the stress levels go down, and typically, especially if like you're dating early, right? And maybe you're still moving through some excitement, dopamine is sky high, which is like the excitement hormone. Serotonin is the happy, nice kind of like even keel hormone that our body excretes. But when you're on dopamine, a lot of things feel great, seem great. So I could totally see that if you're dating someone and you guys are really vibing, like, my God, you even smell better. Your teeth look whiter. You look amazing. Look at the way that you walk and all that stuff, because you're kind of viewing it through your body's chemical experience too. So it makes sense.
That makes sense too, because I feel like when you like somebody, you let a lot of shit slide. Like,
girl. Who's telling?
You know, I always use the example. I always use the example that like this guy was pursuing me and I hated the way he texted. Like, I just hated the way he texted. Like, the
Bad
punctuation. I'm just like, why are you writing like that? And I'm like, but you know what? If I genuinely liked him, I would have been all for this mess.
It's true.
I would have let all of this slide.
It's true. That's how you have all these stories out here. These men that are homeless and they're just out here trying to find a place to live.
And you realize afterward, like, what the fuck was I thinking?
Yeah, it's a real thing. But it is the body's way of relating to its environment. That's kind of what it is at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay. And so the second question in the "What am I doing wrong?" section, how do I stop being emotionally unavailable?
That's a good question. So I think, first of all, kudos for even recognizing that maybe you're a bit emotionally unavailable. I think that's something that it's not easy to see in yourself sometimes. So I don't know if maybe you've heard it so many times or you finally accepted it or whatever the case might be. But how to stop being emotionally unavailable, a good first step is understanding what is it about intimacy that is so scary. Because emotional availability is necessary for intimacy, because emotional availability means we're being transparent with parts of us that are tender. We're being transparent with parts of us that maybe are afraid of rejection or hurt, right? So that is necessary for intimacy. You can't have a real, intimate, authentic connection with anybody if you're not emotionally available.
Mm.
So, what is it about that is frightening? And you'll be surprised. Oftentimes, people may, say things like, "Well, if I show this person this part of me, or I let them in on this, they may use it against me." Or they'll see it and they'll be scared and they'll run, or they'll see what a mess I really am, right? So it is a protection. And I tell people, because going back to this like idea of parts, if there is this part of you that is creating a limit on how much emotional availability you can offer someone else, don't try to tell it not to do that. Don't try to change that part within yourself. Instead, get curious and get compassionate. Kind of like telling yourself, like, I can understand why I'm a little emotionally cut off from people. Well, it's because of this, right? And therapy can, be a really great space for this type of exploration. I think healing also happens in community. Is there someone or people in your life that you are emotionally available with? What is it about those individuals that makes you feel safe, right? But always asking yourself that question, like, what's scary about intimacy, might be a good starting point.
This reminds me of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine where I think a lot of people are becoming more self-aware.
I agree.
But my particular friend, she was talking about like her attachment style and how she's an anxious attacher.
Mhm.
And she was just like, I'm gonna take a break until I like figure that out first. And it was very like, and I just because I know her well, I know she struggles a lot with not feeling good enough. And I'm like, I don't think you have to be 100% perfect, because I also feel like that's not possible for you if you have that tendency to think you're not good enough.
Mhm.
Um, but I think from your perspective, how much, I don't know the right way to phrase this, like how much healing do you have to do before you try to get into something? And like, cause I just feel like for me personally, if I gotta wait till I heal everything,
No.
I'm gonna die alone. Like
Mm-mm.
I will have had no experiences whatsoever.
Mhm.
So I would think I have to find like a comfortable place to heal, but still try. I don't know.
I agree with that. I also I invite people to think about, we're not out here trying to like heal,
Mhm.
right? I think that is such a there's a lot to be said there. I think that applies a lot of pressure. I think it's a very subjective experience.
Mhm.
And the way I see it, just recognizing that there's so many different players within us that have different agendas and perspective. I think it's more about, how can I get these different parts within me on the same page and collaborating and understanding that there is no bad part. There's actually a book called No Bad Parts that I recommend a lot of people to read, because it
Mhm.
talks so much about like what we're bringing up here in regards to like healing and awareness and stuff like that. But there's no bad parts. A lot of times people equate healing to like, that means I'm no longer going to.
Mhm.
And the truth is, what you used to do, whatever that quote unquote flaw might be, right, served a purpose, was needed at some point. You just have to learn how to use it in a more functional way.
Mhm.
So with your friend, right, who's like has identified herself as being anxiously attached, right? There actually are some really beautiful aspects of that part of her that would show up in relationships. And there is a way that she could learn how to work with that part in a more functional way. Because what's happening now, and what happens with a lot of folks, is the parts begin to be like dysfunctionally functional, So we keep going, but we're existing in this space of dysfunction. I don't think that you need to be 100% healed to date, because what the hell does that mean? That's not true. These parts are going to be with us always, and they're going to sometimes show up and get spooked again.
Mhm.
But what you can do is be really intentional about, how are you practicing to not be overwhelmed by a certain part that shows
Mhm.
up. So if you do have an insecure part, are you able to foster and nourish that like parent part within yourself, that when this little kid gets spooked, it's like, you're good. You're fine. You're not going to jump off that ledge. You're okay, right? And then your turnaround is like gets shorter, right? So when something used to throw me off my game, I would be fucked up and in my bed crying for like a week. Now, I'm a little sad for a couple days, but I'm okay. Those are always really good indicators, you know? So I agree with your point. You don't have to be 100% healed. And so much healing, right? Or restoration happens with other people.
Yeah.
Because they're going to bring up stuff that we didn't even know that room still had shit in it. You know, we like cleaned up the whole house and we forgot about the attic. Now we have an opportunity to look at some other things. Yeah.
Right. I know I can speak from like now that I've been dating, there were things that like I knew were, you know, I knew I had like certain insecurities of like, oh, people don't like me, guys don't like me. But until I'm like in that situation of like, oh, this is how it's actually like being
Playing
exhibited.
out.
Yeah. Like I remember one of my first experiences, the guy called me out of like, yeah, I do like you, but like you're like literally like asking me like repeatedly and like getting really like nasty about it. Like so like I did and now
I'm annoyed.
yeah, because I was literally like, I was like, when are you gonna ask me out again? It's been this many days and you haven't asked me on a new date. You haven't checked in with me. Okay, crazy pants.
Urgency.
Exactly. Like okay. And after he told me that, and you know, obviously cut it off, I was like, oh, you know, like it was like a light bulb moment for me that I went to the next thing. Like you don't need to hear from them every moment of every day.
Yeah.
You know, you can look at interest in different ways. It doesn't have to be extreme.
And also recognizing that the same way some of this stuff plays out within you, it's going to be playing out in other people all the time because we all have these different parts within us that have either gotten stuck in time and they're still holding on to pain or haven't really figured out how to use their strengths in the right way. So it's like whenever we find ourselves so focused on you're like in a survival state. And if you're not even thinking about the other person, that's just an indication of like, okay, maybe I need to take a step back and not actually take an action step to fix this. Well, he hasn't asked me out and it's been 2 weeks since we went on our other date. I need to fix this right now. What is your situation? What's your intention, right? Like, take a pause. Why is that freaking you out so much?
Take a pause. I feel like that's like a theme of it. Like, take a pause,
that's
everybody.
all the time. I'm still, and you know that I'm still practicing it myself all the time because the healing is never done, as we've said.
Thank you. You see? So, like, it's
girl, I'm crazy as hell. Let me tell you.
From the professional healer.
Like, literally. But it's, you know, you have to recognize it. Like, so many of us have gone through trauma and gone through stuff. And I've put in the time to, like, work on my own, like, inner little family and stuff. And you continue to do so. And it's totally normal. But sometimes my crazy parts come out. And it's okay.
I love that. Okay, so now we are moving on to the attraction questions. It seems like a lot of people struggling to find people. The first one being, how do you make a guy chase you?
Oh, baby. No, don't make a guy chase you. Why do you want a man to chase you is the question.
I feel like this is coming from my people with the trauma of like, people don't like me, like men don't like me. So I want him to be hunting me down.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I'm not gonna tell you how to make a guy chase you. I think that goes back to that idea of like figuring out why you want that. Do you only feel secure when a guy is consistently pursuing you? And what comes forward when maybe he takes a step back, an organic step back? So not like it's triggered because he decided he doesn't like you or whatever, but like it's when there's a chase, there's no space, right? Look at it that way. And if space causes you to freak out, what meaning are you placing on that space? And you need to understand, where did that meaning come from? What informed that meaning? And what work needs to happen for you to be able to shift that understanding? Because space is healthy. Space within a relationship creates more space for you. So chase, I kind of view it like you're here and it's like, nah, back off a little bit. There needs to be space all the time, because if not, you get overwhelmed and you have to make sure it's kind of like the personal bubble thing. Like, no one that you're in connection with should ever come into that, because that's yours. and you have to take ownership. So you don't want someone to like chase you. Why you want someone to chase you? I don't know.
I also feel like, I don't know, maybe it's my own experience, but like sometimes the guys who like to chase or the things you do to make them chase you is not really about you. And so I almost
Speak on
feel
it.
like it doesn't that defeat the purpose. I want somebody that's so into me, I'm gonna manipulate them or just find the guy that just chases anything. Like,
Exactly. I think it's actually a sign of insecurity
mhm,
when I see anyone, because women chase,
mhm.
people chase, right?
Yeah.
Uh, or like they flood, like they flood you with affection and attention very early on. I always think it's a sign of an insecurity or an insecure part that is very active within them, because why are you trying to flood me? Why are you trying to overwhelm? Why do you not want to have that space? Because they also clearly have some fear around space as well.
Mhm.
So there's something being played out there.
That's for sure. I dated a guy that like I pursued him and it was weird. It was like two chasers and no
Mm,
one knew what to do with it
I'm surprised I didn't
because
just headbutt.
for real, for real. We really were headbutting because he said he'd never dated someone who was like interested in him originally. He's like, I always have to like convince girls to date me.
Mm,
And then so his insecurities would butt into my insecurities because I was like, but I like you. Why are you telling me?
and he
Oh, like
couldn't believe you.
he would wear his insecurity on his forehead. And I'm like, why are you telling me this? I like you though.
Yeah.
Like, and then we were just butting heads at all times.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. That is kind of this idea of like how we're dating blindly, right?
Mhm.
We're like really just like operating from this part that is wounded, and that is actually such a barrier to true intimacy, because then I'm only seeing that part and I'm only showing you this part, and we
Mhm.
can't get past it because there's so much more to people.
Right. For sure. The next question, what's the best way to show a woman that you're attracted to her?
Just tell her, bro. Also, it might be a sis, my bad, I don't know. Don't First of all, that question's nuts. You don't have to show someone. Like if you're trying to show someone you're like interested in them, you can just say you're
Mhm.
interested in them and then just be consistent with said action afterwards.
Yeah.
Just say it. And if it feels scary to communicate it verbally, and maybe that's why you're asking like, how can I demonstrate this in another way? Maybe you need to figure out why that's like kind of scary for you.
Yeah.
But you can just tell someone like, I think you're really attractive. I think you're really dope,
Mhm.
and then see what happens. And then you can demonstrate that afterwards. But just say it.
Yeah, I think I think our culture right now in dating is like abysmal that nobody wants to show interest, but that's a whole
It's real out here. I mean,
Mhm.
I've heard it's real out here in these
Yeah.
streets.
Let me tell you, you're lucky to be out of the game. I want out of this game so bad. No, I'm just kidding. But I do think that people are scared to show
Yeah.
interest, show that they're more interested. And so it's like, if you want to, like, I feel like this person is probably like, how can I like nudge it without really putting too much of myself out there? You
Exactly.
know, it's like,
Exactly. It's like it's trying to play it the safe way so you don't have to be vulnerable.
I hate that. Cause I'm like, if nobody's vulnerable, like, how are we gonna get anywhere if
It's really
everyone's?
superficial relationships.
Mhm.
You don't even really know your partner's depth, because you've just stayed at this level, you know? And
Mhm.
that's kind of going back to whoever asked about the living with the partner. Like, it's really hard to even have a friendship in a relationship if you're staying in this superficial level and you're not being intimate and vulnerable to understand the depth of the person, to then create an actual friendship, you know?
Yeah.
Boyfriend and girlfriend titles don't mean anything without that intimacy.
Okay, the next question. How do you feel about the dating games people play to find love? Do you think they work? I think we kind of touched on this one
Throw
a
them out.
little.
Throw them out.
Mm,
They don't work. That's all I gotta say.
perfect. Perfect. Um, what's your take on or understanding of the law of attraction and how vibrations play a role in our lives?
Good question. Um, I do believe in like, universal law. And I think law of attraction is one of them. Vibrations, I do believe in it because I have such an understanding of how the body
Mm.
um, plays out a lot of our internal experiences externally, is what I should say. So the body is full of vibrations. And when you are sitting with a thought or an experience that causes neurologically, right, your brain to then send your, I should say, the nervous system to send the message to your brain that you need to excrete a certain type of hormone to keep us safe, that internal experience is going to cause a certain type of vibration within the body. Because one thing about the law of attraction, I think sometimes it feels like very metaphysical, and
Mhm.
it's like it's actually very physical. It's scientific. Like all the stuff that people have come to know as like new age spiritual woo woo is science that has existed for a really long time. We just don't have the knowledge. So it's a physical vibration, which is the same thing, the other side of the coin, right? If you're experiencing something that produces serotonin, peace, happiness, your body's going to vibrate a certain way.
Mm.
So when it comes to like manifestation and the law of attraction, understand that you can't trick your mind to think that the body is doing, you can't trick your body to think your mind is doing something. So you have to actually like exist with the experience, not just like think about it, you know?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm very skeptical about a lot of that stuff, but I think at the very least there's a truth to like if you believe, you really believe that like the world works in your favor and then like good shit happens to you can go through life with the same experience as someone else, but you're looking at the good shit.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
like people that have that negative mindset, they're going through life and they're like, they didn't put cheese on my sandwich instead of like,
I got a sandwich.
I got a sandwich. And they didn't put
Hmm.
cheese, but it was good. You know what I mean? Like
I
there's,
I ate. I'm fed. I'm
mm-hmm.
nourished. Yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Because I mean, I could just say from my life, like I've been that negative Nancy, and as soon as I flipped that switch, I'm like, my life didn't change. I was just looking at the good part as opposed to the crappy part.
Mm.
You know?
Another thing I would just add to that, because I think one of the, I guess, talking points I hear a lot when it comes to folks that are a bit hesitant to like believe that school of thought. I remember I forgot how long ago the video came out, The Secret. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was little and my mom watched it and stuff. But something I think is talked about a lot is this idea of like not, you could just like think it and it'll happen. I think that you do need to do work, but I think the work has to be self work,
Mm-hmm.
because through that self work, either A, you'll land on that lens that you just described, where now you're just experiencing your circumstance in a different way. And now you're able to step into peace and happiness, or you do the self work. And within that, you recognize there was actually self sabotage or there was barriers. And now I have the confidence to step forward and actually bring these things into my life. So it's not work, external work,
Mm-hmm.
right? You do have to do work, but it has to be a lot of internal work. And then that stuff begins to kind of work for you, as they say.
That's so true. I never thought of it that way, but I'm like, I was definitely like super self sabotaging. Like opportunities would come, and I'd be like, not I.
Mm-hmm.
I am not worthy of it. And now,
Exactly.
which is why I say I'm like, hypothetically, my life didn't change much. Like it was still like similar opportunities. It's just
Mm.
that now I'm like, oh, I'm looking at them positively as opposed to like, woe is me. But it,
Right.
you know, like you said, I did the work that now I'm willing to step into them. So I guess it,
It works.
it works.
The
Yeah.
proof is in the pudding.
Um, so we are running low on time. Is there any, I guess, is there any like overarching thing that you want to tell all our singles out there that are going through that, trying to figure it out, that to you might be like a golden rule for dating?
Yeah, I would say the golden rule is don't try to put so much energy into getting to know someone else if you haven't gotten to know yourself. I think you need to know yourself really well. And it's because we're ever evolving. You may have known yourself 5 years ago, and that doesn't mean you know yourself today. So you really need to get to know yourself well. And I think so many people, because of all these different things we've talked about, right? There's such an avoidance of self that then we seek out connection for the wrong reasons. And that's why we see relationships not working, right? Divorce is happening. Like, we joked about it, right? But like the truth is there's so many people that, I mean, granted, maybe it's like qualitative data. I'm not out here like taking numbers, but a lot of people that talk about the state of relationships as they stand right now. And I think it's because so many of us don't actually know ourselves. You have to be in a healthy, compassionate relationship with yourself. Because if not, other relationships are just going to mirror whatever's happening here.
Mm-hmm. And you're not really in the relationship because you're still in your own thing.
Exactly. You're looking for love for the wrong reasons.
Well, I want to thank you again, Monica.
Thank you for having me.
Dropping gems on us.
I'll clean up the floor after.
No, let them pick it up. They need to pick it up. Okay. We out here strong. We need to pick the gems.
You're right.
But I love having you on. Thank you so much. If you did not check the other podcast out, it's our first episode. It's going to be titled something like Late Bloomers with therapist Monica Gavilanes. So make sure to check it out. Even if you're not a late bloomer, you'll take something away from it. And also make sure to follow Monica on Instagram and hopefully TikTok. So I'm going to put her onto TikTok so she can fix all the crap that other people are telling us on TikTok. Okay. So follow her on Instagram. It's Roots and Alchemy. Again, that's Roots and Alchemy. And then come back next week for another episode of the 30-Year-Old Virgin Podcast. Hey everybody, this is Allison, your host and creator of the 30-Year-Old Virgin Podcast. This episode is actually the last one for season 1. It's been a wild ride, but we'll be taking a short hiatus while I interview the next batch of incredible people. Before the break, though, I want to thank all my amazing guests for sharing their time, insights, and stories. And I also want to thank the amazing people who work behind the scenes to help this come to life, specifically Khan Boogie, who designed our logo, animation, and merch, Dev B, who created our intro music, Mark Matters at Record House, who does all of the audio and video as well as hosts us in his beautiful studio, and Paola Powwow at Courage Fitness Club, who's been guiding me on all things business. Last but not least, I want to thank everyone who tuned in thus far. It was really scary launching this podcast and being vulnerable about something that people normally don't talk about. So I am really grateful and humbled for all of your support on this journey that was both personal and professional. I'm super excited to keep working and to come back bigger and better next season. I promise I will be back soon, but until then, keep blooming. All right. That's it.
That's it.